Many of you may have noticed just how much more difficult this game is compared to the original. Maybe it's the last 7 years of not touching a 2D platformer Metroidvania Souls-like, but I'm going to come out and say that this game is inherently much more difficult. Apart from the clear issues of Hornet being more fragile, having to figure out what a 45-degree angle looks like, and enemy movement being more aerial, Silksong's difficulty is fundamentally laborious. Bosses can take upwards of 50 hits to kill, the adds they summon can be infuriating or make it impossible to escape death, and the sheer agony of the run back between bosses can be deteriorating for the mental. But hang on, wasn't the original Hollow Knight the same? I distinctly remember the tankiness of the broken vessel, the chaos of the Watcher Knight fight, the run back of the Mantis Lord. Hold on a minute, Silksong has the same issues as the original, so why is it different? Well, I thought these were the plight, but I got it wrong. The difficulty of Silksong actually stems from its Metroidvania roots, not the lack of masks, a straight downwards attack, or even a fair boss fight. It's from the exploration. Metroidvania is a term coined by the mashup of two iconic titles, Metroid 1986 and Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and is used to describe a subgenre of 2D action adventure games that emphasize exploration, non-linear progression, and the gradual acquisition of abilities that unlock new areas. So Hollow Knight to a T. Both Metroidvania and Castlevania were the breakout titles that adopted this formula to wide success, and ergo the genre was dubbed Metroidvania. God, it feels good to get ergo in the essay. But why is this important? You see, the phrases non-linear progression and gradual acquisition are what I want to focus on. It's these elements that dictate the difficulty of the game. When you get stuck somewhere or on a boss fight, the intention is for you to say, okay, I'll come back later. Go off and explore, find a new tool or a new ability, then return and tackle the challenge again. Take for example this guy, Greg, I'll call him. He's a big, ugly red bug that smacks his bone down real hard and there isn't much room to maneuver. Now Greg isn't even an official boss, he's just some bug doing his job, blocking a path you need to go through to progress in Act 1. See, Greg's attacks are very large and while telegraphed can be difficult to dodge without the dash ability. So the expected solution is to go and explore, find the dash ability and then come back to the fight and breeze through it. But here's the thing, what if you're an idiot like me and forgot about an area or missed a little side path or whatever and missed the dash altogether? Now, Greg seems like the only way forward, so what do? Fight Greg over and over and over and over again until your face hits the wall and Greg finally falls. Was this fight difficult? Extremely. Was it meant to be difficult? No. The expectation is that when reaching a difficult fight you go off and explore. After all, that's what a Metroidvania is. But what if you've explored for literal hours like I did, missing the correct path every time? Yeah, then we have a problem. And that's the difference. To bring it back to the juxtaposition with the original Hollow Knight, the issue of the broken vessel being too strong is overcome by the fact that you can go and get weapon upgrades to deal more damage. The panic from the Watcher Knights can be overcome by just coming back later with more health. The run back to the Mantis Lord fight can literally be made easier by, again, exploring and unlocking new abilities, mask shards and better charms. Hollow Knight is made easier because its Metroidvania exploration rewards the player plentifully at any moment in time. There is always more tools you can find to expand your arsenal. Fast forward to Silksong and it can feel like scraping through scraps to progress. Sure, when we get stuck we can go off and explore, but everything feels so limited. It feels less likely that I'll find something actually useful in overcoming my obstacle. Maybe there is an element of get good to it that I'm happy to live with, but Metroidvanias are about exploration and reward for such exploration. Without gratification in substantiation of rewards, what's the point? A Metroidvania lives and dies by how exploration feeds progression. Silksong's difficulties, highs and lows are all entwined in its Metroidvania design, not the perceived surface level issues. The challenge presented by Hollow Knight Silksong is somewhat deceptive. On the surface, Act 1 feels disproportionately difficult to the rest of the game. It is not that the enemies are overwhelmingly aggressive, nor that the bosses employ mechanics widely beyond comprehension. Instead, the difficulty is ingrained in something subtler, the lack of empowering rewards that reinforce the player's growth. In most Metroidvania experiences, rewards are what smooth out the difficulty curve. Charms, abilities, and upgrades function as tangible proof that exploration was worthwhile, giving us the players both new tools and renewed confidence to press on. Silksong's Act 1, however, denies this crucial feedback loop. The charms and the crests available in this opening stretch are undeniably useful, but they rarely feel transformative. These diversify Hornet's playstyle rather than amplify her strength. When a boss demands precision and resilience, a change of flavor in a movement or combat does little to mitigate the crushing reality of a 3-hit defeat. By contrast, the original Hollow Knight provided a different philosophy. If you ever felt stuck, it almost didn't matter where you wandered. The map was so generously stacked with meaningful upgrades that a detour nearly always left you stronger. A charm that extended survivability, a spell that opened new offensive options, or a nail upgrade that significantly boosted overall damage. These discoveries meant that progression was rarely bottlenecked by brute force. In Silksong's Act 1 though, that safety net simply isn't there. Exploration still exists, but its fruits are meager. This is perhaps why so many players find themselves at their wits' end during the early hours of the game. Act 1 demands more resilience than its rewards prepare you for. The core issue is not that exploration is absent, it's that exploration isn't sufficiently rewarding to shift the balance of power in meaningful ways. Take for instance the most notable early exception, the Flintstone. It's an incredibly useful tool, however this lies behind a locked door in the deep docks, requiring a simple key. And here lies the dilemma. Many players will instinctively use the key to unlock a door above Bone Bottom Village instead, because that's probably the most memorable door of the two places and is also closer to the vendor you buy the key from. That choice, which feels natural and encouraged by the world's design, results in missing out on what may be one of the truly powerful early game tools. The problem compounds when you consider Hornet's frailty in Act 1. The player begins with only 5 health masks. Most bosses, however, deal 2 points of damage per strike. This arithmetic is devastating. 3 hits and you're dead. The natural instinct is to explore for more mask shards, hoping to bolster survivability. 4 shards will grant an additional heart, but the effect is illusionary. With 6 health masks, you are still dying in 3 hits. What should feel like an incremental step forward collapses into futility. The reward exists, but its impact is negligible, and the frustration deepens. What's the point of hunting and exploring for mask shards in Act 1 to get extra health when bosses still kill you in the same number of hits? The crests available in Act 1, the Reaper Crest, Beast Crest, and Wanderer Crest, illustrate the underlying design philosophy. Each alters Hornet's movesets in dramatic and interesting ways. They diversify playstyle, encouraging experimentation and making combat encounters more expressive. Yet none of them make Hornet unequivocally stronger. They do not shorten boss battles, reduce damage taken, or provide that kind of decisive advantage one might expect from early game exploration. Instead, they reshape the dance without changing the stakes. For some players, this may be satisfying enough to get a new toolkit and try something new, and they might click with one of them and find a boss fight much easier. But for many others, it means exploration offers novelty but little power, and novelty cannot compensate for repeated failure. And yet, in spite of these frustrations, Silksong retains one of Team Cherry's greatest strengths: world design. Even in Act 1, the architecture of the map is extraordinary. Areas interconnect in subtle and elegant ways, ensuring that progression is never entirely linear. Your path forward may be radically different from mine, even in the same sections of the game. The sense of freedom is vital, as it instills the illusion of choice even when substantive rewards are lacking. Silksong invites players to wander, to loop back, and to stumble into alternate routes. In this respect, Act 1 does actually succeed. The non-linear web is beautifully constructed, even if what lies at the end of those strands rarely alters your fortune in combat. The result is a paradox. Act 1 both exemplifies and undermines the principles of a Metroidvania. On one hand, its interconnected world encourages exploration, creating the thrill of multiple pathways and discoveries. On the other, the rewards scattered along those pathways are inconsequential to the central challenges. The bosses are still brick walls, the player is still fragile, and the upgrades feel cosmetic rather than empowering. Exploration, which should be the key to overcoming difficulty, becomes tangential, interesting for its own sake, but not decisive in shaping outcomes. This raises a deeper problem, the erosion of player motivation. A Metroidvania thrives on the loop of curiosity, discovery, and empowerment. The player is incentivized to explore because they know exploration will help them. In Silksong's Act 1, the loop falters. Exploration is decoupled from progress, leaving players to either resign themselves to brute forcing repetition or disengage from the world's promise of secrets. In my own playthrough, I found myself behaving less like an adventurer and more like a Soulsborne player, throwing myself against a boss over and over and over again until eventually muscle memory delivered victory. In Elden Ring, that's an acceptable part of design. In a Metroidvania, it feels like a betrayal of the genre's core ethos. In essence, Act 1 highlights how fragile the Metroidvania formula truly is. Without substantial rewards, exploration loses its power to motivate. Without meaningful progression, difficulty feels oppressive rather than fair. The bosses are not necessarily harder than their counterparts in the original game, but because the player is offered so few tools to shift the balance, they feel insurmountable. The elegance of interconnected spaces can't mask the absence of gratification. The limited rewards transform exploration from a source of empowerment into hollow plight. The scarcity of impactful upgrades forces players into patterns of brute force repetition, undermining the genre's promise of flexibility. And yet, even in this flawed state, the beauty of Silksong's world design remains, well, its strong suit. It is as though the silk itself is frayed, the weave is still visible, still intricate, but the strength of its thread is compromised. Act 1 is by far the worst part of the game, which is crazy to think when so many games lead with a strong foot to pull you in. Hollow Knight Silksong really tests your commitment to the journey. Reaching the Citadel marks more than just a change in scenery. It is this symbolic threshold where Silksong truly opens up. Act 2 is an ascent into possibility. As Hornet climbs into the Citadel, the game unfurls in what feels like every direction all at once. The Metroidvania DNA finally asserts itself. More paths branch outwards, more abilities become available, more quests, or wishes as Silksong dubs them, scattered across the map. Here, the promise of exploration begins to fulfill itself, and the game blossoms into the kind of layered, rewarding adventure we expected all along. One of the most immediate improvements is the boss design. Act 2's encounters feel rhythmic. Bosses are still numerous and demanding, but they are better telegraphed and more deliberately choreographed. Each fight becomes less about enduring endless suffering and more about attuning yourself to the rhythm. These are not Souls bosses in the sense of opaque, punishing walls. They are dance partners, difficult yes, but fair in their tempo. Trial and error and persistence reveals the steps, and once you've learnt the rhythm, the fights are exhilarating rather than exhausting. But the true centerpiece of Act 2 is without question the Citadel itself and its surrounding regions. The sheer ambition of this area is staggering. Calling it the greatest hub of a Metroidvania I've ever explored is not hyperbole. It's genuinely one of the finest feats of world building I've seen in a game. The Citadel is everything a grand capital should be, a place of opulence and decay, splendor and squalor. And it's enormous. Its vast halls, winding passages, and multi-layered architecture feel less like a level and more like an ecosystem, alive. Consider what it contains: a banquet hall dripping with excess, contrast against a med bay filled with grotesque, failed experiments, a luxury spa, yes, a spa, balanced by the dangerous pools, paid toil of the undercity. The high halls provide a glimpse of the privileged, elite gold lining and sense of immaculate prestige in the layout design. The Citadel is a marvel, not because of one singular landmark, but because it feels like a functioning, if not broken city. A place of worship, labor, culture, and corruption woven together into an environment that rewards both awe and unease. A story to be told in level design that makes moving through it and exploring it feel enticing. You feel compelled to uncover every corner of it. In many ways, this is a White Palace reimagined, where that earlier sequence in Hollow Knight offered a focus test of platforming precision. The Citadel expands the concept into a grand holistic vision of a capital at its peak and its collapse. Exploring it feels momentous, the kind of experience that makes you pause, whisper, "Holy shit, this really is a Citadel," and then lose yourself in the details of hours and hours and hours of exploration. The Metroidvania structure also begins to assert itself more intelligently here in Act 2. The High Halls Arena is a progression check. It quietly interrogates you as a player. How fast are you dying? If too quickly, then you haven't gathered enough mask shards by this point. You should probably have 8. How much damage are you dealing? If the answer is not enough, then you've skipped essential upgrades like Pale Oil. Are you using your tools effectively? If not, then the fight forces you to rethink your approach. Have you explored enough? If no, Chakra doesn't come to assist you in this fight. The arena doesn't berate you with text or explicit markers, it simply exposes the gaps in your progression. Fail and the message is clear. You need to return, explore, and grow stronger. It's an inbuilt system that you cannot brute force your way through, but the game is clearly outlining this as a point you really need to question how much of the Metroidvania you are engaging with. The problem is, with Silksong, it contradicts itself a little here. In the first act, exploration is limited and brute forcing your way past bosses kind of felt necessary to progress, while in Act 2 it's more like, yo, chill, come back later. There is so many places to explore and goodies to get. It's a contradiction and arguably kind of poor design. So much so I can't blame the people who say this game sucks because it's too hard. Because the Act 1 they were taught that exploration isn't rewarding, and because of that they mentally rush their way through Act 2 with only 6 masks, a single needle upgrade, and the poor skills and tool usage. Of course they're going to find this difficult and complain about it. In truth, Act 2 demands that you play Silksong as a Metroidvania, not as a linear gauntlet, because that's what makes Silksong so special. The sheer scale of exploration and world design that is just so incredible. And yet, for all its triumphs, Act 2 hides another issue: the risk of incompletion. This is both the curse and the gift of a Metroidvania title. On the one hand, entire swatches of content can be missed, and the game's full tapestry left incomplete. On the other hand, the player who embraces exploration, who indulges in curiosity and discovery, is rewarded with one of the genre's most expansive final acts. To love Metroidvanias is to accept this duality, the thrill of discovery balanced with the nagging fear of having overlooked something vital. Silksong thrives on this tension, weaponizing it to create both satisfaction and unease. It's why Act 2 is so impactful and incredible to me. There are entire sections I missed that my friends played through, and vice versa. And so Act 2 leaves us at a crossroad. For some, it's the end of the journey, a fitting crescendo for the Citadel, where the silk seems fully woven, but for those willing to look deeper, to tug at the hidden threads, Act 2 becomes the loom that sets the stage for Act 3, the silken tapestry. What follows is not merely more of the same, but the true silken tapestry, a culmination of all of the game's promises, woven into something larger than either act before it. After defeating the Silk Mother and playing the Needleoin rather than Binding, the game reveals its final secret, an unexpected third act. This is Silksong's most elusive gift, tucked behind layers of exploration, side quests, and willingness to question the ending you've already been offered. Where Act 1 frayed and Act 2 wove, Act 3 unravels the silken tapestry, both familiar and transformed. The first thing you notice is how Farloom itself has shifted. Paths you once knew are marked by rubble and ruin. Destruction closes some shortcuts while offering new diversions, creating a landscape that is recognizably the same yet threaded with unfamiliar tension. The addition of void enemies further heightens the uncanny return to older places. Old rooms now feel unsettling, shadowed by this creeping corruption. A Metroidvania thrives on revisiting and recontextualizing spaces through new abilities, and here Silksong doubles down by altering the world itself. It is not merely you who has grown, but the environment has shifted alongside your choices. The transformation serves a dual purpose. Particularly, it refreshes the map at precisely the moment many players might have grown weary. After all, if you've reached this hidden act, it's because you've already felt ready to end your journey. You had likely satisfied your curiosity, charted most of the map, and stood prepared for closure. Act 3 interrupts that certainty, offering just enough newness, altered pathways, fresh collectibles, even late game skills to rekindle your desire to explore. The genius here is subtle. Instead of overwhelming you with vast new regions, the game reweaves familiar terrain, infusing it with novelty. The Metroidvania loop of curiosity and discovery is rekindled, just when you thought it was finished. The late game surprise affirms one of the genre's most enduring principles, that there is always another door, always another layer waiting for those who persist. It is an audacious design decision, reminding us that in a true Metroidvania, discovery is infinite in spirit, even when finite in scope. And so, Act 3 embodies the paradox of Silksong's Metroidvania lineage. It is at once old and new, recycling spaces while reimagining them, extending the game without bloating it. It tests the player not with sheer difficulty, but with endurance of curiosity. Do you still want to see what lies beyond? Those who say yes find themselves immersed in a coda that feels both generous and intimate. A final reminder that genre is not defined by endings, but the endless pursuit of what lies just out of reach. In truth, Act 3 is not essential. It is not designed to be. It is the silken tapestry finally flourished, a hidden embroidery meant only for those who lean in close enough to see it. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please consider leaving a like and subscribe. Also, feel free to let me know what you thought about Silksong down below. I always answer all my comments and I love to chat and debate with you all there. And you know what? Tell me what your favorite boss is.